Can you hear me now? I think you can hear me better now, right, guys? Yeah, just forget about this thing because it might just not be very useful right now. Yeah? For some reason, this thing is not even working anyway. Can you hear me now? Oh, yeah. I think you can hear me better now, right, guys? Yeah, just forget about this thing. Yes. Okay, I think I need to start again, guys. It looks like we have to start all over again. Oh boy, how disappointing, yeah? Okay, let me greet you. This is Maureen Mangati Nyekbo, and we're here on behalf of Kenya Updates Live. Kenya Updates Live is a channel that I started just to discuss important things, yeah, and things that have got nothing to do with my personal life. I also have my personal channel that you probably watch, and that's separate from this one. So I started this one so that I can encourage more people who are not really interested in my personal life, to talk about things that have to do with the nation and things that affect all of us. So I want to say good evening and thank you for watching and thank you for joining me. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. Yeah, I've had to have a stop and start today because I used a different platform and that didn't work. And now I'm using these things and they're not working. So I'm just hoping now I think we're okay. You can hear me. All right. So what are we discussing today? Today, we are talking about the Kenyan economy and the fact that the economy was projected to be growing at 5.3% in 2026, and it sounds all good, but the problem is that GDP growth is not actually translating into wealth. It's not translating into any sort of growth, economic growth at the individual level. And so the question is, what are they measuring? What are we measuring? Because you see, it depends on what they're measuring. Of course, as we all know, maybe you don't, most of these are what they call macroeconomic indicators. That means they're looking at things like financial institutions, the borrowing, if the Kenya government is borrowing, and you know how much we borrow. Yeah, if the Kenya government is borrowing money, then there's money coming into the country, then it is assumed that we are doing better. Financial institutions, if they're bloated and they have money, then we assume to be doing better. But the problem is they're not counting the inflation at the micro level, which is at the household level, which is at, for example, transportation, your matatus, your cars, fueling at the pump, food, you know, and things like that. Instead, they're just counting things, that really don't impact your and my pocket. So they're looking at things like telecoms and saying, oh, our telecoms are growing. So of course we talk a lot. And they said that Kenyans have a unique way of dealing with communication. I think it was Michael Joseph who said that at some point. Yeah. And yeah, so we're communicating even more, but that doesn't mean that we're doing any better. It just means that the GSM providers are getting richer and we are not. So the question I have for us is, how are we going to reconcile the government's stance on the increasing, GDP, that we're doing better economically, and the fact that we have such high inflation rates at the micro level? Yeah. How are we gonna? It's like we're not communicating. The government is supposed to be serving the people. Yeah. The government is there to serve the people, but it's not actually considering the people's own expenses, the people's cost of living. Instead, it's just looking at its own interests, which is, the very flimsy excuses that we've been hearing around, being thrown around, are that the reason why our fuel prices have gone up so high, because at first the fuel prices, as we know, were increased by 28 shillings from, I think it was 176 to 204. And then they were reduced again by, I think it was like 9 shillings. So, still there's a difference. We've still increased by 16 shillings. Yeah, that fuel price. And it's still high. Yeah, it's still high because you see, now we see that the public service vehicles have increased their prices. Ourselves, when we go to the fuel pump, it will mean that the number of kilometers we used to do was going to have to come down, because in the meantime our income is not changing. And of course, Kenya is not the only country that is impacted by this. And that's what I was saying earlier. Kenya is not the only country impacted by this. I was watching social media posts of people who live like in the UK and the US, and one of them writing to her employer on a day when she could not travel to the office to say she can no longer drive to work for 5 days a week. It will get to the point where you and I may get to the point where we can no longer drive. In fact, most people do not drive 5 days a week. And it'll get to the point where even maybe taking a matatu 5 days a week might become too expensive for us. So it is an issue. The reasons that we've been given for the increment in fuel, according to our leader, our president, was that Kenya is now a middle income country, and middle income countries have higher rates of fuel than other lower income countries. But the fact is, actually, the real difference is actually the policies. The policies of the countries where fuel is cheaper, like Uganda, like Rwanda, like Burundi, like, all the other countries, Tanzania, is because the government itself decided not to increase tax too high on fuel. So Kenyans are paying very high levels of tax. According to Dinyoro, 50% of the cost of fuel is actually tax in Kenya. So, in other words, out of the 204 shillings that we're paying, 100 shillings there is tax. So, the government can decide to reduce the tax on fuel. But I also saw that the IMF was also pressuring the government not to reduce the taxes for us on fuel. And so, you see, it will take a very strong leader to stand up to organizations such as the IMF, World Bank, and the rest of them to say, no, my people need to eat, my people need to travel, my people need to do business. This is the way we're going to pay back your loans, not by increasing the taxes. We need to work, yeah, and make the money and save the money and trade. How do we make money? Through trade and other ways, yeah? So I feel that we are just not being considered adequately by the government, and the government needs to come clean on this. The government should come clean on this, guys. It should, because we have employed the government. We are employers of the government, and they're there to work for us. They're there to represent us. And also, if they represent us, they have our protection because we are the people. Yeah, the people are very strong, as we have seen with the country of Iran. The country of Iran stood with its leader because they see that their leader is working in good faith with them. But in our country, we don't see that. We don't see many people coming and standing beside our leaders. Why? Because we feel that they are not representing our interests. And maybe they need to just change that attitude and see what happens, because maybe they're doing this out of fear, out of coercion and things like that. But in the end, it's we the people. It's we the people, yeah, who are going to determine, how things are going to move forward from here, yeah, because we cannot afford it. It gets to the point where we cannot afford healthcare, cannot afford food in this country, cannot afford food. No, 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 no. Many people are actually leaving the West to come to Kenya. Today I went shopping. No, not today, it was yesterday. I went shopping and I've seen so many foreigners in the shops, in the supermarkets, buying things. A lot of Americans are here. A lot of them, regular Americans, they have moved to Kenya because the cost of living in Kenya is much lower than their country. Cost of food, even if we think the prices of food are high, they're not complaining. They're on international salaries. Okay, they're on dollar, they're on forex. We should not be outpricing ourselves out of food in this country and out of basic necessities such as healthcare, education, transportation. And so that's my concern today, guys. I'd love to hear your comments. If you have any comments, if you have anything to say, feel free. You can type them in here. You can type them in here. I'll also be checking to see if you have any comments on Facebook. Maybe you do. You can go to my Facebook, Mwangati, so you can just see, comment there on Facebook as well. Yeah, feel free. Don't feel shy. Yeah, You can speak your mind. You can come on to the platform and talk. I know many of you are very much alert and much better than me at this kind of analysis. But the fact is that it's not about who's smarter than who. What? Oh yeah, I can see lots of you are watching me. 12 views. Wow, that's pretty good. I'm happy about that. Yeah. So you're coming in and you're leaving, but I'd like you to stay with me. Yeah, let's talk. Forgive me because I'm also going to be taking a look at some of my documents as I speak to you, because, and that means that I might disappear from view, but don't worry because I'm still there. I'll come back. Um, so basically, the question is, if the government is spending more than it's earning and borrowing the difference, yeah, that's not going to help us as Kenyans to go forward. Yeah, it's not going to help us at all. So the fact is that there is an economic slowdown. There are signs of an economic slowdown. There's no way that Kenya is going to be able to achieve its 5.3% GDP growth for 2026. In fact, it's been brought down. I believe it's been lowered to about 4 point something percent. But still, that is macro level. That is a higher level. Yeah, that is a higher level. Construction services, agriculture, and things like that, and finance and fintech, and construction and agriculture. Uh, so the thing is that GDP has slowed from what was projected to be 5.7 to 4.7% between 2023 and 2024. Manufacturing is only at 14%. And what that means is that right now we're facing a situation of high food prices. Let me take, instead of disappearing completely from view, let me see if I can just take a picture of what I'm reading here, of my notes, because I did take some notes today. I like to take notes because I like to evaluate things and stuff, and I like to be accurate. Don't like to just talk. Eh? Spend it too. I like to speak with context. Okay, so let me come back to you guys. Yeah. So businesses are borrowing from the bank. Sorry, so the government is borrowing from the bank, and businesses can't borrow. You and I, meanwhile, the banks are extending credit to people so that they can earn interest, right? The banks are extending credit. Credit is at high interest rate. And so that credit is available, yes, but it's at high interest rates. And of course, we don't even get the level of credit that we need. The credit that is being extended mostly is for the small and micro enterprises. We can't grow a country on SMEs. We've got to grow it on big manufacturing sector and on farmers and people like that. As long as our GDP growth is low at the micro level. GDP is at the micro level, but if inflation is high at the micro level, it's going to be almost impossible to grow our country. Inflation is very, very high. Yeah. So the reality is that the spending power of Kenyans has come down, business activity has come down, cost of living has gone up, informal sector, huge pressures on the informal sector, which has employed more than 70% of Kenyans. So one thing the government needs to understand is that this is reality. This is the reality. Yeah. So we can say that, the expenditures of the households are so high on things like healthcare. If SHA is not working, then the expenditures on healthcare are going to be too high, and that will create a big gap. And so we say that consumer goods, they're not really changing in price, but what's changing is the affordability of people. People can't afford to buy them, even if they're there. So what's the point? You start a business, you start a restaurant, you're a great cook, but nobody's coming to your restaurant because nobody can afford to eat there. So we see on TikTok so many people talking about they're closing their businesses, so many shops closed. I'm sure, it's quite disappointing for very many people. Yeah. Yeah. So we have a problem when it comes to food, fuel, transportation, housing, rent. Huh? Low growth in that area. People are going to be moving back home at this rate. Electricity, education, that's energy as well. Energy is also a problem for people not just from Kenya, but also from outside the country. Education, many children are going to be out of school at this rate. Yeah. So, my point is today, coming on the live show, was to just maybe just initiate this conversation and hope that you will join me. I think that you can see the link. The link is there. You can join me here. The link is says StreamYard. You just have to go in. If you have a computer, if you have, in fact, even if you just have a phone, if you just see the link there, you could just join me and come in. What are your views about the current situation in Kenya? The fuel crisis is going to impact us very badly. Now, let me talk as a diasporan, somebody who has come from outside the country into Kenya. This might be of interest to those of you who are considering leaving the country and thinking that living the country will make your lives easier. Let me start laughing now. I've lived in the UK for a while, and what I can tell you is that life in the UK is very, very expensive. Very, very, very expensive. People are leaving the UK because it's very, very, very expensive. Yeah. Food prices are up. In fact, even the variety of foods that you find in the shops are reduced. I think you must have seen in London when there were these riots. Yeah. Children are going into stores and taking food off the shelves. Why were they doing that? It's not because they want to, it's because they're hungry. You won't believe that people are hungry in places like those countries. In the UK, people are hungry. They're going without. They're having to choose whether to make a hot meal or whether to have a sandwich and pay for energy. You either have a hot meal because you cannot cook. Those people in the UK, many of them cannot even cook, can't even afford the fuel. They can't afford gas. They can't afford electricity to cook. So what are they doing? They're eating buns and soups from containers. Let me tell you, I don't really think that we're any better off than they are because many of them have access to benefits and many of us don't have access to those same benefits. So, cost of living abroad is very high. Cost of travel, I saw the cost of travel, the cost of tickets from Nairobi to, let's say, London have gone up tremendously. They're not talking about that. Jet fuel has gone up, so tickets are going to go up. Cost of travel is going to go up. Cost of living in those countries is going to go up. Cost of living is going up here as well as there. So, what is the solution for us? My advice to us all is to consider that we have to at some point become self-sufficient in as much as we can and try to go off grid as much as we can. And that's a topic for another day. But we really have to consider other alternative forms of energy, whether it is going to be through through the energy that you get from yeah, there's of course the solar energy, and of course there's also energy that you get from the solar energy, and there's also gas that you can get from, if you keep an animal, if you keep like a cow, you can actually get gas from there. You can actually operate a generator. We need to move back to the land. We need to grow our food. I mean, people who are living in high rises and apartments, you really have to think hard for yourselves because life is going to become impossible. It's going to become, when the lifts are no longer working because the electricity is not adequate and not reliable. You have to be walking up those 10 flights of stairs to get to your apartment. Yeah. Many people have decided to invest in apartments. Not bad, but an apartment is not the same thing as having land where you can farm your own food. But that's just the short-term solution. Longer term, the government needs to think because we have too many young people that are out of work and they need work. They need to work and they need energy to work. We don't want to become like Nigeria, where they're always struggling to have electricity to the point where they're even composing music and songs about it. Generator go, spoil my ear. There's a song like that about generators. I've been to Nigeria several times and I've seen how people struggle, businesses struggle. Each business has its own generator. Can you imagine the noise pollution, the smoke, and the air pollution? Yeah, and on top of that, the cost of doing business in Nigeria is crazy. It's very, very expensive in Nigeria to do business because of that electricity, lack of electricity. So we have people who are able and capable, educated, and who are unable to be productive because they don't because of the high cost of energy. High cost of energy is an issue and we should be concerned about it. Okay. So I don't want to make this too long. I think I've gone as far as I can because I haven't actually seen anybody speak up, but I'm not discouraged. I believe at some point you will come on board and you'll start to communicate and participate in my show. Let me see. It looks like I can see somebody. Can't post? Can't post comments to some. Oh, no, no. That's not somebody that. Yeah. So I'm just happy anyway to have talked to you guys and to vent. It's my opportunity to vent. But we want to see what's going to happen on Tuesday. I think I'm going to try and come back on tomorrow, just so that we can continue this discussion. Because on Tuesday, as we have heard, we are hearing that people are planning mandamano. They're planning protests because of the hike in fuel prices. And we have to be aware that this is an issue. By the way, insecurity is also an issue that has happened, that is a byproduct of the high cost of living. We're hearing that people are snatching people's bags and purses, and we've gone back to that. That even if you're walking or taking public service vehicles, you're still not safe. So we're hearing that there is protest and there's mandamano planned on Tuesday. And all I can tell the people who are planning the mandamano is that, okay, I'm just one person out of millions. But my own view is that there's ways that you can also pressure the government to listen to us, and other ways could include a sit-in. One of the ways is also to strangle the economy by staying at home. Stay home and keep safe. That's one way of doing it. But if you decide you want to go to the streets and protest, the problem with that is that it's going to make the government, it's going to flag the government. They're going to get nervous and they're going to start thinking that there's going to be destruction to property. And as you know, it doesn't look like they really care too much, about our lives. So if I were the one, I would rather get the option of staying home, because after all, the cost of petrol, the cost of fuel is too high. Yeah. One can make a noise at home, just stay home. And if people don't go home, then the services are not running. And only the essential services, go to work, such as doctors, nurses, people like those essential services. But I mean, it could be that we decide that, okay, we lock down the economy and just the IMF will have to think twice about telling the government that they should not increase, that they should increase the taxes on fuel. Sometimes you need to pressure them like that. I think that what we need is like a think tank of Kenyans. We need a think tank to come together to think about how we can voice our opinions safely for yourselves, and at the same time also impactfully, in a way that has impact. Because the only impact I foresee on Tuesday is loss of life and almost nothing happening. And I just pray for my dear Kenyan brothers and sisters and children out there for your safety, because mandamano, yes, it can force change. Yes, it can force change, but the cost is also, as we saw, very, very high. So we have to think about, is that something that you want to do? Yeah. And this is not to instill fear in anyone, but it's just to say one has to consider the facts, that they stand, and who it is that is in power with us today. There's nobody that doesn't value their life. But you see, we would prefer if we would have like leaders who would listen to us, leaders who would listen to the ground. Listen, because after all, it's all in their best interest to help Kenyans to manage the economy, to manage their own economies at home. It's in their best interest because, after all, they are the service providers. They provide services. They are the ones who supply stationery. They supply everything in the schools. They supply energy. They supply petrol. If nobody can afford to put petrol in their cars, what is your petrol for? Yeah. So before I get emotional on it, all I want to say is thank you for listening. I appreciate it. It's been nice to see people come in and out of the stream. And I hope that next time we're going to have more discussion and more interaction. Okay. So have a good night. I know it's a weekday and some of you are going to work tomorrow. For those of you who don't have jobs, I just want to encourage you that you should just keep on looking, keep on searching, and expand your net. But remember that if you're planning to leave the country, uh, it may not be the right solution. There is work. I think the attitude would be to change your attitude about work, and instead of attitude towards jobs, and look for work instead of jobs. Look for work because there's a lot of work. And you see, people are always in need of services. So there's work, and also you can produce things and people will buy. But let's just see where this is going. Yeah. I'm a little bit off topic now. So good night. Thank you for watching. And let's see you perhaps tomorrow. Yeah. And definitely on Tuesday itself. Definitely. Hopefully I will be on if we have internet, guys. All right. Keep safe. Take care. Bye bye. Thank you for watching. Thank you so much. Bye.